Well, thanks for joining us today for the Story Crafters Cafe. I'm your host, Hank Garner, and today I am super excited to have author Sally Britton on the show with me today, and we're going to talk all about Regency romance today. Welcome to the show, Sally.
Thank you so much, Hank. I'm excited to be here.
I'm super excited to have you. When we started talking earlier this week, I started really digging into your catalog, and there's so many questions I have, Sally. So thanks for joining me. Um, we're gonna kick off each show with a question that I thought of last week, and I thought this was a great icebreaker and something that everyone listening, I guarantee, can connect with in one way or another. What is a piece of writing advice that you have received over your writing career that maybe it is a piece of advice that completely changed your life, or a horrible piece of advice? I think we've all gotten some of that in the past, but what about for you?
I think my favorite piece of advice it was at a writing conference, so I'm going to count it as writing advice, but it was from another author. And I was very, very new. I had just hit publish on my first novel, a couple of weeks before I attended this conference. And I was very overwhelmed with just how many people were writing in my genre and thinking to myself, what difference does my book make and why am I doing this? And I'm always going to be in competition with all of these other authors. And this woman who is now my friend, she just looked me in the eye and she said, a rising tide lifts all boats. When one of us does well, all of us will do well. And that really changed my mentality. It made me want to be more helpful to other authors and see the people in my genre less as competition and more as co-creators. So,
That's a great way to look at it. I remember talking to Hugh Howey, a science fiction author, several years ago, and this was really around the time of the Kindle revolution, when people were when self-publishing became uh, changed from being the pariah of publishing, that you only self-publish because it was a vanity thing, and
mhm.
became a legit way to build an audience and to get your stories out to the world that was um that would love them, and it became a legitimate form of publishing. And he said, we're not in competition with each other, and I'm paraphrasing.
Mhm.
We're not in competition with each other, we're in competition with Facebook and YouTube and all of these other things that are drawing on people's attention. If we can get someone reading and completely lost in a story, when they finish that one, they're going to want to find another one that scratches that itch for them. And like you said, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's having that perspective, I think, makes authors less. I've seen it in my genre where sometimes people can be a little bit antagonistic toward each other.
Right.
But if you can find a community that embraces that same idea, then it becomes such a positive thing and such a force for good,
Right.
within our genre and for our readership.
Yeah. Well, and there will be a certain amount of people that are competitive and feel
Mhm.
like that they are competing with you, and just don't let those people get to you is what find your community. Yeah. So you write Regency romance. What was it that endeared you to the genre at first? Because I've read your blog, and I know that you're a fan of fantasy, and you are a fan of urban fantasy, and other things that really that you love to read. But what is it about this genre that you chose to write? What endeared you to the genre?
I actually love all the rules that come with writing, not just Regency for sure. It has very specific rules, but comes with writing with historical. I love fantasy. I think it's my favorite thing to read. And I am, at this point in my career, very intimidated by the people who are able of creating their own worlds and magic systems and all those rules that govern it. I have always been a rule follower, like from the time I was a little kid. I was the
Yeah.
kindergarten line monitor in kindergarten. So the fact that Regency came with a very set, set of, using set twice, of rules, and that everybody who reads in the genre knows and expects and follows. And there's an added challenge to that I also really enjoy, is how can I be unique and different while I still have to work within this framework of accepted rules. So, I mean, I read across all genres and I love reading Regency. So when I was ready to finally pursue the path of the author,
Yeah.
that's what spoke to me.
So for people who may not be um, very well versed in the rules of the genre, what are some of those ground rules? What separates Regency romance from another genre?
Well, Regency actually takes place in a very limited time frame. If we're talking very strict Regency, it's only about 30 years in the history of Great Britain. And that's the other thing about the Regency, is it is only in the Great Britain. So
Okay.
you have a very limited area. Anything that's British or where British people would be around, between the late 1790s and the early 1820s. So it's a very strict set of fashion rules, courtship rules. Women were very limited into what they could and couldn't do. And there were just strict societal barriers. It's a really interesting period in time. And as more authors have come to it and explored all the different ways to break the rules creatively,
Sure.
has made it a lot of fun. So most people get their first introduction to the Regency by watching a period film. Yeah, so a Jane Austen novel adaptation. So Pride and
Okay.
Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility.
I
Pride and
think
Prejudice
most of
and
us are
Dombey.
familiar with
Yeah,
those and may not realize that that's an introduction to this
exactly.
time period and the genre.
Yeah, so Jane Austen was living in the Regency, and she was a contemporary author of that time period. And of course, now you have the big sensations like Bridgerton that has come out, and Sanditon that came out that was very popular. So it's a very romantic period in history. At least we tend to romanticize it. There were definitely things happening that were not good at that point in time. But that's an also interesting aspect of writing it, is writing this romantic, you know, fantasized almost version of what history was, and balancing out, all the inconveniences and all of the not good things that were also going on at that time.
One thing I find interesting about the Regency period and the literature that comes out about it, um, living in the 21st century, we have technology that has made our lives um, so much easier. I mean, we're getting to do this show because of the advances in technology. Our favorite piece of writing software, Dabble, is you know we have that because of the technology that's available to us now. Um, in the Regency period is this interesting time. It's really before the Industrial Revolution, kind of just before it. Um, but there have been some societal advances that kind of bring us right up to that. But do the restraints of the time period and the technology, how do you feel writing in that? Does it make it easier because you don't have to deal with text messages coming in the story, or someone getting lost and just being able to pull up Google Maps, or
Right.
does that make things easier when you kind of remove all of those advances?
I would say in a lot of ways for romance, it does, because I have friends who write absolutely fabulous contemporary romances. And yet sometimes one of their events is they can solve all of this just with a quick 5-minute text conversation. And, communication is probably the biggest way that I would say we differ from back then. It took letters, sometimes weeks, to reach people once you wrote them. And letters weren't private the way they are now. You send a letter, there's a good chance somebody would read it before it even got to its intended recipient. Um, and I think that creates a really interesting host of problems, but it makes some of the plot devices that I use a little bit easier. One thing that a lot of romance readers are concerned about, that it's not their favorite trope, is miscommunication. And it's because we live in an age of communication, and,
Right.
it's so easy to pick up a phone or to update a Facebook status or whatever it is to communicate what's going on in your life and how you're doing. Whereas back in this time period, if you weren't seeing people and interacting with them on a daily basis, they had no idea what your life was like and how you were doing. And so I can play with that miscommunication trope a little bit more than my friends who write contemporary, because there were so few meetings face to face. It took letters a long time to get places. And then the societal norms of that era even meant that some things you didn't talk about, even if you really needed to talk about them.
Right. So, as a fan of the genre, what was it that prodded you to write that first story? If I'm not mistaken, you've been publishing since around 2007. Do I have that right?
Oh, no, no.
Oh,
I've been writing since 2007. No, I published for the first time in 2018.
okay. So
Yeah.
so what was it? What was the motivation to start writing that first story? And was it a bolt of lightning? Was it just something that had been nagging at you for a while, and you decided to sit down and put proverbial pen to paper? Or what was that instigation?
Honestly, it was that moment of write what you want to read. I wasn't finding enough of the stories that I wanted as a reader. And because of that, I started telling myself the stories, just thinking ideas through. I've always been into writing. I was a huge fan fiction writer in my late teens, early 20s, and all through the college years. So I loved telling myself stories or retelling stories in ways that I liked better. If you're a fan fiction person, you know how that
Yeah.
works. You take characters you love, or you take an ending that you didn't love and you change it. So when I was ready to start writing, well, what made me ready was not finding enough stories and wanting to see a different type of story or more of a certain story. And I just couldn't find it because the Regency genre was, I think we've gone kind of through a renaissance in the last
Hmm.
couple of years. And I came in at the very beginning of that, because people were starting to read the books that were available, but they weren't being churned out fast enough to satiate
Gotcha.
the readers.
So you are an indie publisher. You publish your own work. Was that always a consideration for you? Because you came along in publishing kind of that Kindle revolution that we talked about a minute ago, kind of around the time that was really maturing, and there was lots of information out there about how to uh, self-publish or indie publish, and there was a lot of uh, good feelings around indie publishing. You really came in at a great time. Was that something that was that part of your strategy, or how did you decide that indie publishing was going to be the route for you?
After I started writing my stories, I wanted to share them. And of course, we start looking at the different options for that, traditional publishing and indie publishing. I didn't know a lot about indie publishing. And I would say 2016, when I was starting to really think about this and dig into it, I had a poor opinion myself of what indie publishing was. And like you said, that was the beginning of this revolution. And I spent all of 2017 um, writing and researching about indie publishing and talking to as many people as I could talk to. I read, at the time, there was this wonderful book out called Writing for Love or Money by S.K. Quinn. She's since taken it down because it's no longer current. But that book and her advice really made me understand that I didn't necessarily want the clout that
Hmm.
comes with traditional publishing. I didn't need that validation, which I think a lot of people, feel like, and I'm speaking in very general, broad terms here, but there are still people who feel like they haven't made it until a publishing house or an agent have told them that they've made it. And I realized I didn't need that. I just wanted to get my stories out. For me, this wasn't a business decision. It started out as a stay-at-home mom's hobby that she did for fun so that she could share her stories. And self-publishing seems like a great way to do that. And as I was researching, I found out, oh, people are making money doing this. And um, so I was publishing smart. I wanted the pretty cover. I made sure
Right.
that my book was well edited. But I honestly was thinking to myself, if I make enough extra money to, take the family on a small vacation once a year, or to just pay for myself to go to these cool writing conferences that I keep hearing about and haven't yet attended, then that's good enough for me. And that's how I kind of entered it. Was not thinking this is going to be a career, not thinking this is going to be what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, or that one way was necessarily better than the other for income. It was more about how can I get my stories out
Yeah.
quickly and share them with others.
So I'm glad you kind of went down that trail for a minute because um how do I say this? There's a school of thought that says writing should be pure and it's an art form and we shouldn't worry about making money with it. Another school of thought that will every job is legitimate and just because you happen to take this art form and make money with it doesn't make it any less um, real or or whatever. You started in just writing from your passion and just because it fulfilled you in some way. Well, now you are at the place where this is providing legitimate income for you and probably has changed your family's um the way you live and the way that your family is supported. So have your ideas about writing for passion, for fun, versus writing for profit? Have those changed at all, or do you feel any conflict there? I guess is what I'm trying to say between art and commerce.
This is an amazing question.
Mm.
I
These
feel
are
the
things I
conflict.
lay awake at night, just thinking.
Yes,
Good.
it's an amazing question, and I think it's one that I probably revisit myself constantly,
Yeah.
frequently, if not constantly. Uh, right now, I really question art versus commerce when I'm on a deadline. When I'm
Right.
realizing I've got a week to get something to my editor if she's going to be able to get back to me in time for me to do XYZ. So I think there are facets for me. Of course, I'm speaking
Yeah.
for myself. It's different for everybody, but there are facets of writing that are now very commercialized for me. Very much in my head. When
Yeah.
I'm thinking about covers, I'm not going to please myself. I'm only going to please my readers. Um, I set up pre-orders for books. That way my readers can see them and pre-order them. And that way I can see that number rising and know that that is income I can count on the day that book
Sure.
releases. Um, and I do look and see, okay, well, what are readers really interested in right now? What's the big trope that everybody's reading, for example, um, as far as how I market things. But I still feel very, I don't know. I'm not sure. Here's the thing. I think a lot of us don't necessarily apply the idea of art. At least
Hmm.
I don't apply the idea of art to my books. I do not expect my art form, my books, to be around after I'm gone. I'm not thinking that my stories will have that kind of longevity, but I think that they are very valuable in the moment. Um, I enjoy knowing that they go out into the world and they entertain other stay at home moms like I was. I love that they're in nursing homes and libraries, and that I get readers from all over the world who have a few hours of enjoyment, entertainment, escapism from what I'm writing. And I think as long as I stay aware of that joy that I'm bringing others by sharing these stories, that I will be fine. I have lots of ideas still, and I'm aware enough of the market that I know I can continue to sell my ideas, if that makes sense.
Well, and isn't that why we all write to begin with? Because we want someone to read our stories.
Yes.
We want them to emotionally connect with something that we have to say. I mean, let's just reduce it down to why we do what we do. We want to entertain someone, and we want them to feel something.
Exactly. Yes. And as
Yeah.
long as I'm accomplishing that, um, then I'll keep going. So,
I wrote a book one time. And it was called Writer's Block, and I got an email from someone, and she said, "The ending of this book made me snot cry," and that was one of the best compliments, you know, that you could hit someone that hard, and that it's
absolutely.
they're left with something, and that's what we all want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I live
So
for those emails.
right, right, those are
Yes.
the best. Let's talk just a minute, because your writing career sort of parallels the Dabble timeline. You started using Dabble early in your writing career, didn't you?
Yes. In 2017 for NaNoWriMo, I got the free trial. I think at that point, it was like you got it for free for the entire month of November and then for, like 30 days after that or something. So yeah, but I started using it at 2017 for NaNoWriMo, and I was very skeptical when I
Yeah.
started.
So
Yeah.
had you started using Microsoft Word, or something that a bland word processor that most people at least cut their
Oh
teeth on?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had used everything from Notepad because Notepad was so not distracting,
Right.
and Word, but Word crashed and I lost things. And then I tried to use, what people said was the end all be all software for writers.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I should mention names. I think we all know what we're talking about here.
Yeah. The one that's
But
overly complicated, and
yes, so
yeah,
many bells and whistles, and it was
and
so
never
difficult
updates
to
for Windows.
exactly. And I didn't want to buy a Mac back then. I have one now.
Yeah.
I've got a Mac now, but there were so many things that I had tried, that yeah, Google Docs, and then trying to, organize things, and do you keep it all in one big file? Do you, organize it by chapters? And yes, it was a mess. All of my files, I had so many files in so many different places trying everything, and nothing really flowed. So I was skeptical of anything that said that it would make my writing better than what was already out there.
So for the one person listening who doesn't know what NaNoWriMo is, it's a challenge to write a novel, 50,000 words in the month of November. And it brings writers together to encourage one another and to, prod each other on, and a place to track what you're doing. So what was it? What was the draw for you to do NaNoWriMo first off? Did you see this kind of challenge and, well, maybe I can do that? Or was it something to keep you accountable, or what was the initial draw?
I've done NaNoWriMo since college, just every year, even when it
Uh,
was just fan fiction writing. Yeah. And it's because I love the camaraderie. I would go to in person meetings, and they used to have all these great forums that I would go and hang out on. It was as much a joy to connect with other people who loved writing and telling stories as it was the fun of the challenge. It sounds, people who haven't done it before think it sounds awful, for us to really force those 50,000 words in a month. But if you enter into the spirit of National Novel Writing Month, it's so much fun. So I was just, scrolling through the offers that NaNoWriMo, they send out, things to get ready, and, they you prepare in October and all of these things. And I had noticed Dabble, and I noticed that was for free, and you can't beat free. So and I was just at that point, I was just up to my eyeballs in being upset with word processors. And I had decided that what I wrote that November, I was going to turn into one of the books I was going to publish the next year in 2018. And it was the third book that I published that year. So it was, I was going at it with maybe a little bit more aggression, I guess, than I had in the past. So I was looking at all their offers and seeing what they had, and Dabble was on there, and it had this, cute little description that was written by Jacob, because I'm pretty sure he was almost a one-man show at that point.
yes.
Um, and just inviting people to come try, and that it was brand new and it was just launching. It's like, okay, sure, why not? Um, what's going to be the downside of this? And I like that even at that point, Dabble had a great word count. capability. And that's a big thing about NaNoWriMo, is keeping
Yeah.
track of your words. And I didn't want to have to go in and do the math every day, subtract whatever it was from my total word count on a word processor or Google Docs.
Got to
So
get those 1,600 words a day.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that was what happened. It was a free sample, and I was aggravated and aggressive.
So from there, you finished NaNoWriMo. Did you hit your word count for that
I
month?
did. I surpassed it. I
Yes.
surpassed it. And like I said, and that book was the third book I published. So
That's
it worked
amazing.
out.
That's me. And you've been a Dabble user ever since?
Ever since yes, every year I did NaNoWriMo. I think in 2018 I did NaNoWriMo specifically so I could get the Dabble coupon at that point, because there was a coupon offer that year
Yeah.
to do the subscription for less. And now I do have the uh, lifetime Dabble subscription. So
Nice. Nice.
it's
And
fantastic.
and Dabble has added features over the years, and the plot grid and all the plotting tools are really a lot of people come and stick around for that. As writers, we like to put people in one of two camps. It's been my experience that no one really falls solidly into one camp or another, but we
Like a
love to talk.
sliding scale.
Yeah, we love to talk about pantsers versus plotters. Where do you fall?
I am a light plotter, and
Gotcha.
sometimes I dive into the pants. But no, I am a light plotter.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also the type of writer that they tell you not to be,
Yeah.
where I edit as I go.
Yeah.
So my first draft is usually very clean, and
I
I
know
think
a
that's
lot of
part.
people like that.
Yeah,
The fun writing advice is turn off the internal editor and just pound out the words. And that doesn't exactly work for everybody all the time. I
that's not
understand
fun.
the spirit behind the the advice, but it doesn't actually work for a lot of people. Sometimes you need to edit as you go.
I agree. And because of the nature of what I write too, because it's historical, I'm pretty well versed in that time period in history now. But there are times where I can't continue until I do that little bit of research too. It's like, oh, I need to look up this year in particular
Yeah.
to see if this thing works. So I don't know. I've always edited as I go. I actually think that's something that I brought from my days as a fan fiction writer, because back in the dirty days of fan fiction, you'd publish, especially if you wanted to keep all your readers happy, you'd publish, every week. And, if you're lucky, you would have a beta reader, but most of us were just writing and publishing and writing and publishing. And I don't know, it was fun. And I'm sure fan fiction as a culture has changed a lot since then. I'm not really in that culture anymore, but I think that carried over into this writing, is just get it out, get it as perfect as you can, get it done, and then move on.
Yeah.
So
At what point, Sally, did your writing start to change? And what I mean by that is um when did you realize that this passion project that you had um kind of had legs, and that this could be more than just something that you do for fun and personal fulfillment, that maybe this is a business, and I can take this thing that I love and I can actually make money at it. And the second part of that question is when you started having that realization, did that change your writing work ethic? Maybe work ethic's not the right term, but the way that you approach, maybe before you gave yourself 10 hours a week to put into it, and maybe now you realize, maybe this needs 20, 30, 40 hours a week. Kind of, could you just talk a little bit about that progression going from passion to something that's paying the bills?
absolutely. Um, so it was very much passion. It was also a way for me to distract myself. A lot of authors, I think, come into this almost as a therapeutic practice. My husband, at the time that I started writing, worked in law enforcement, and
Okay.
he had a very dangerous job, a very dangerous career. And I would put the kids down at night because I have 4 children. I'd put the kids down at 8 o'clock at night. They're all in bed. The house is quiet. I'm alone, and he doesn't get home until 1, and I don't know if he's coming home until midnight. So that's when my writing started, and when I thought, let's see if we can make some money with this and share it with people, and see if I can at least get the books to pay for themselves. That was the mentality when I started.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to tell my stories. I want them to pay for themselves. And it would be nice to take the family on vacation, not even a big vacation, just on a vacation. And I started to connect with others in the community, writing community, who were writing like I was, other women who were writing at night because their families were asleep or whatever it was. And we were all talking, and some of them were looking at this as a career.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what slowly started to happen was I was listening to these women, talking to these other women about how they could use their words to make life better at home. And I love that idea. And so I'm like, I'm going to do this. And the first, couple of months that your first book is out, you're lucky if you see, $20.
Sure.
And they started talking about things like reader magnets, where you would draw readers in with a free shorter work, and then get them to want to read the rest of your work or sign up for a newsletter. Like, I can do that. That's not a big deal. And I love getting newsletters from my favorite authors, so why not try it?
Yeah.
So it was just a slow trickle of starting to try things. And then that first month that I made 4 figures was shocking. I was like, oh my goodness, this pays for the next 4 books in terms of
Right.
editing and covers and things like that. Because historical covers are not that expensive, not like fantasy covers. So, and then the first, $5,000 month happened. And this was all within the first year of me writing. And by the last month, I had a $16,000 month. And I had 5
Whoa.
books out. Yes, and it was amazing. And I had 5 books out. And because I had done all this research prior to publishing, it's like, yes, I want to tell these stories for myself, but I want them to be pretty. So I had nice covers. My covers, I think, were a big part of what drew people in, as well as, the fact that Regency itself as a genre was about to implode and explode and just get bigger than anybody could imagine. So I had a sweet spot. I really did hit it at just the right place. I came in. But when I looked at that month, that December in 2018, and I looked at how it had grown steadily, and I still felt, it's like, people say, well, are you going to get burnout or run out of stories or not like what you're telling anymore? I still had a library of books inside waiting to get out, all in this genre. And I had a meeting with my husband when we were talking about our taxes. And I said, look, I have to pay taxes. This isn't hobby money anymore. And I think I'm good at this. And I think I can be even better at this. I'm a very organized person in terms of admin work. I was always very good at admin work. And so the business side of things didn't intimidate me either, because it's all admin. So he said, okay, well, let's make a real go for it. And how can I help? I had a very supportive spouse. So
Yeah.
I'm very, very grateful for that. So every day he would do all the morning stuff with the kids, despite his weird hours, and help me with the house. And then I would concentrate during the day, when I still had little ones who weren't, school age yet, of doing the business stuff and learning the business stuff. And by the end of 2019, I was making more money than my husband at his full-time, very dangerous job. And we
Wow.
looked at both of our incomes. And at the end of 2019, I said, you're going to quit. I said, you are done. We're not going to do this anymore. You're not going to be in law enforcement. And I support you in doing anything else that you want to do. But how about you quit that, and let's live off of what I'm doing for now. And it really was such a gradual growth that I don't think I can point to one moment and say, this is the moment I knew. But definitely that year when I looked at my, that big paycheck, that December 2018, and I looked at how steadily, my royalties had done just this, going upward, upward, upward. It's like, okay, this is real. This is real money. And I was surprised that I was good at it. And I'm like, you know what, though, I can use this. I can help my family and build the community. I was excited.
Yeah.
It was a challenge. And I don't know. I feel like I was the kid that I was never great at, the musical instruments or sports. I enjoyed all that stuff, but I never found like this magical thing that I was good at, like other people
Yeah.
I knew. And so here I am, as a woman in her early 30s with a family, and I find that thing that suddenly I'm just good at this. And, the business aspect of it and my writing, people seem to like it. Nobody thought it sucked too much. So it was it was a steady, gradual process. Does that answer the question?
Yes, that's amazing. Sally, there comes a point in every successful author's career, um, that let me rephrase that. In the beginning, people find your books and maybe they like the genre, maybe they like the cover, the title, something appeals to them, and they give your book a chance. And then maybe it's part of a series and they come back to continue the series, or whatever happens. But at some point, people stop coming, or a certain portion of your fan base stops coming for a particular book and starts coming because they trust Sally Britton, and they become fans of Sally Britton, not necessarily a book in your series. And maybe people come for that, but there comes a point where they come for you and not necessarily for a particular book. Um, when did you start realizing some of that was happening, and that you had people that were fans of you, and that they trusted that you were going to tell them a story that they were going to love?
It was about halfway through 2019. So about a year and a half after I started publishing. They tell you don't read your reviews. They tell you a lot of things, and
Yeah.
you just need to do what you're comfortable with anyway. But I was looking through reviews. I was looking specifically for like a pull quote to use somewhere. I don't even remember what the situation was. But I read on one of these reviews, somebody said, Sally Britton is an auto buy for me. And that was the first time I had seen it. Yeah, just like explosion. It's like as soon as they saw my name, they didn't care what the series was. They didn't care if it was a continuation of something, if it was something new. If my name was on it, they were going to buy it. And it blew my mind. And I sat there. I remember that moment. I sat there for a moment and just kind of stared at it. And I thought, this is absolutely nuts. This is crazy. I mean, why does this person trust me so much?
Right.
Because at that, I still struggle with it a little bit, because I feel like people are still should be. I don't know. I don't know how to explain this. I have authors who are on my auto buy list. I will buy anything that they write, and it's because I love their work and I love the way their work makes me feel. And so I
Right.
understand that, but from this perspective, I don't understand why anybody still does that for me. It's like, this is incredible, and why. I had a project I wanted to do recently. I've never been great at keeping like a series Bible, something that keeps all my characters and all the little details about them in place. And so I'm constantly having to go back and look at previous books to find things. And it was driving me crazy. So I floated this idea out to one of my readers. And I said, do you think anybody would be interested in helping me do this? And she freaked out immediately, said, oh, yeah, we can put together a team and we're going to have all these people who are going to be interested in it. And you're really going to have to whittle it down and choose who you want. I was like, there's no way. Like when I reached out to the readers that this is, would you be interested in like reading my books and taking notes on it? I mean, I felt like such a phony. Like I had the
Yeah.
biggest moment of, this is unreal, and they're going to laugh and nobody's going to do this. They're going to think you're arrogant or you think you're all that or whatever. And but I asked and they were excited about it and grateful that I had asked them. And what a humbling moment that I had the ability to say, hey, would you want to read this thing I wrote and take notes on it for me to use later? I mean, that is such a backward idea in the first place, but they were so enthusiastic about it, and they've done an amazing job with it and saved me hours and hours of work. And as they went back and reread these books, because these are people who have read everything I've written, so far.
Yeah.
They re-reviewed them and re-shared them on social media and talked about them again. And this is all fairly recent too. It just blows my mind that I have created enough somethings that people trust me to keep creating.
It is so cool.
It's so cool. And it's so much responsibility. It's the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. So this is not going to my head in a way that's like, yeah, I'm fantastic. I hope I'm never at that point, but it's very humbling. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I really don't want to disappoint anyone now. I cannot disappoint these people. They have so much faith in what I do. So
With great sales numbers comes great responsibility.
Exactly.
Maybe would be the update for that quote.
Great super fans.
Right. Looking at your Amazon page, you have 3 books up for pre-order. One releasing in April, one in May, and I believe the third one releases in July. What is your production schedule like?
It's busy.
It looks like it.
It's busy. I'm a pretty fast writer. Fast and self-editing usually don't go together, but I manage somehow.
Well, you've done it enough. You ought to be getting pretty good at it.
Oh yeah, it's a routine, and occasionally I get thrown off that routine. I really wish, and my goal this year, before my entire family had COVID in January, my goal this year was to be writing a book ahead of schedule at all times. Because I haven't been that way. I write and release.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it has always gone. But COVID struck, and it actually delayed that plan, and then put me even further behind when a different sickness hit my whole family in February. Because even though dad is now stay-at-home dad and kids are in school, I am still mom. And every woman who listens, watches, knows what that means. If your family is sick, there's nothing else happening.
Right.
So right now I'm kind of a little bit frenzied, but usually my production schedule is about 6 weeks to write a book. And
wow.
And we're talking decently thick books. Like some of my books are 65K. I have one that's 104K. Most of my books are around the 70K, 70,000 word mark. So about 6 weeks is usually the amount of time that I can do a complete, full, meaty novel to give to my readers. So I do that 6 weeks, and that's dividing my days between writing and then all the admin work that goes with making this a business. And then I send things to my editor. That's usually another 2 to 3 weeks. And then, of course, as soon as it goes to my editor, I start the next thing. I don't sit and twiddle my thumbs and wait for that to come back. I'm already writing whatever comes next. And so then it comes back from my editor. I spend about a week fixing it. It goes to proofreaders or beta readers or both. And then it uploads to Amazon and it goes out. And because I've got, it's about a 2-month window for one book to get completely done. And my covers are all ahead of schedule. Because it takes that 2 months, I'm pretty good at knowing when I can release things and when to set up pre-orders for. Have I ever regretted setting up a pre-order or counting on my schedule? Yes. Yes, I have. But yeah, I know myself well enough that I even know if I'm way far behind on a deadline, I know what it would take to bring me back. It'll take a weekend in a hotel by myself, or it'll take several days of my family not seeing me except at meals. And again, that supportive partner is very important. If your partner is not supportive, this is going to be way harder for you. But yeah, because I've got that, I've got that system pretty well oiled at this point.
Does being a partial plotter, and I just coined that term just now, does being a partial plotter help you to maintain that sort of 6-week writing schedule, kind of knowing the skeleton of the story at least, and having notes and maybe filling out the plot grid? Does that help you when you're doing the down and dirty drafting of the story?
For certain. Yes, it really does. The thing that people say, and I think you can say this about any genre, but the thing I hear people say a lot about romances is it's so formulaic and you always know how it's going to end. Well, of course, if it's a romance, we know that the hero and heroine are going to be together by the end.
Yeah.
We know that. So that's also really helpful is when I start, I know how my story is supposed to end. And there are specific beats to the story. There's a rhythm to every romance. Yeah. And I've actually learned more about that in the last year than I did when I originally started as an avid romance reader. I had that beat very naturally. I recognized it even though I didn't know what it was. And I've learned in the past couple of years that there are entire systems and entire methods of writing this beat and this system perfectly. But that really helps too as a romance author, is that there's a specific set of things that have to happen. And they have to happen at specific times in the book for the book to make sense. You have what people call a 3-act structure. You have your 7 or 9, main beats.
Right.
And that really helps too. So even though I'm a loose plotter, like you said, I know what the pattern is. So if I'm at a certain point in my novel and I see how many words I've written thus far, thank you, Dabble, I can look at the structure and say, okay, what needs to happen next is this. They've had this happen, now they need to have a falling out, or they've had their falling out, now somebody needs to help them come back together. I think romance novels are a lot like taffy pulling, old-fashioned taffy pulling, where you stretch everything out and bring it back together, stretch it all out and bring it back together. And because of that very natural rhythm, I think that it makes it a lot easier. And I'm sure there's going to be somebody out there who hates me for saying that it makes it easier. But for me, it makes it easier to keep on schedule and, make good time, I guess is the right thing to say, as well as to catch up. And a lot of times, when we get to the murky middle of a story as authors, we start to feel that lag. That's another nice thing about romance is what's supposed to be happening. If you feel that lag, It's like, okay, it's time to stir things up again and throw something at this couple that it's going to make life difficult for them. And I'm pretty sure you can say the same thing about other genres, like fantasy. Okay, it's getting a little bit slow. I need to throw a new wizard or witch or magical sword or something, whatever it is, at these characters that they now have to deal with before they get to the end of their quest.
I heard someone say one time that the way to write a story is take a protagonist that everyone loves, stick him in a tree, and then set the tree on fire.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. And I have used that example
happens.
so many times. Okay. I have to say this just for a second. There is an absolutely brilliant show on Netflix. It was a remake of an old sci-fi show. I don't have the name right now, but they did that in the very first episode. So this isn't a big spoiler. And I was teaching my children writing at the time, and I was teaching classes for kids at a library about how to write and how to, up the stakes. And I said, you put your person in a tree and you kick the ladder out from under him and then set the tree on fire. That was the example I used. They did exactly that in the show. And they threw an enemy in the tree with it. Yes. They did that with a little boy. And that is precisely exactly perfect. And I cheered when I saw that. And they took our example and they made it literal. It was fantastic.
It's so fun. So Sally, there's going to be one listener who's listening to the show that maybe is not familiar with your work, but after listening to you, they really want to dig into some Sally Britton books. What's a great on ramp for a new reader who has just discovered you? Where would you tell someone to jump in?
I write my series, very loosely connected.
Okay.
So that they're very fulfilling. If you start at book 1 in a series and go all the way to book 6, that's great. But each book can also stand completely on its own.
I love hearing that.
It's great. It's one of those where characters from other books make cameo appearances.
Right.
But it doesn't really spoil the fact that, you haven't read their book first. And I did that on purpose because there are certain tropes that I know I look for. For instance, one of my absolute favorite Regency tropes, and it's a big romance trope too, is the arranged marriage trope. So that is one of my favorite. Would I ever want to live through it myself? No, absolutely not. But it is such a fun trope to read. Um,
That's why it's so fun to torture other people with it.
e- Absolutely, exactly.
Right.
So like I said, I try my best to make my books where you can pick your favorite trope and then find a book that suits you. If you are a hardcore Regency person and you love the ballrooms and you love the dancing and everything that comes along with being in London at the height of the season, people who know Regency will know what I mean. Then you'd want to probably start with my series, the Inglewood series. The first one is Rescuing Lord Inglewood. And that's arranged marriage, marriage of convenience, and it has all of that great Regency stuff. But if you're new to the genre and you're just interested maybe in sticking your toes in or giving it a try, I have a few novellas that people seem to enjoy. I'm like looking behind me so I can remember what they are. Oh, so the one that people like most right now that is like selling like gangbusters, it's amazing, is this one. It's called Her Unsuitable Match.
Love it.
And it's a marriage of convenience story. It's a war story. The hero is a veteran from the Napoleonic Wars. So people seem to really love this one. It's very, I don't know, there's some angst in it, so people seem to like that. But if you're very new and you don't have any idea about the Regency, then I suggest this pretty cover. It's a book called A Haunting at Havenwood. I have ghosts in it, but they're not too scary. And it's just a more gentle introduction into that world and those romances and that time in history. So those are good places to start.
I love it. We'll put links to those in the show notes. Sally, I also know that you have a fantastic website and you blog there regularly, and we mentioned the blog earlier. Is that the best place if someone is just discovering you and wants to follow along with all the great stuff that you're doing? Is that the best place to follow you? Is there a social media account that they should also be aware of?
I have a reader group on Facebook called
Okay.
Sally's Sweet Romance Fans. So if you like that reader group, I'd say there's something in there every day that I'm posting, or the other fans are posting. But my favorite thing to keep updated just with me and what I'm doing is on Instagram. So I like taking pretty pictures of things. So
Well,
that's my
Instagram
favorite
seems to
place.
be where all the good vibes are, also.
I say the Bookstagram community is absolutely my favorite social media
Yeah,
community. They
I
are
love it.
so welcoming and so kind.
Sally, thank you so much for taking time to join me today in the Story Crafters Cafe. We're going to send everyone to see you and to pick up your books. Thank you so much for taking time to come on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.